there is a book so dangerous, so filled with secrets, that for 1500 years the Church refused to let you read it. They called it heresy. They burned it. They buried it beneath centuries of silence. But they could not destroy it. Deep in the highlands of Ethiopia, hidden within ancient monasteries carved from stone, this book survived. Unchanged, unbroken, complete. Tonight, you will hear every word of it. All 108 chapters. The Book of Enoch. This is not a bedtime story. This is the story the Church didn't want you to know. The story of angels who fell from heaven, of giants who walked the earth, of forbidden knowledge that led to the great flood, and of a man named Enoch who saw it all and wrote it down before God took him away. You won't find this in your Bible, but you will find it here. So close your eyes, let the world fade, and listen as we open the pages of the most forbidden book in history. This is the complete Book of Enoch. From the Ethiopian Bible, the only place on earth where it was never lost. Let us begin. Chapter 1. Who was Enoch? Before we journey into the visions, the heavens, and the mysteries that shook the foundations of the earth, we must first ask a simple question. Who was Enoch? His name appears only briefly in the book of Genesis. Just a few lines. Easy to miss. Easy to forget, but those few lines contain one of the greatest mysteries in all of Scripture. Genesis chapter 5, verse 24 says this: Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He was not. That phrase has echoed through the ages. Enoch did not die as other men die. He did not grow old, fall ill, or return to the dust. He simply vanished, taken up by God himself. But why? What made this one man so special that God chose to lift him from the earth while he still breathed? The Bible does not tell us, but the Book of Enoch does. Enoch was born in a time when the memory of Eden was still fresh. His great-grandfather was Adam, the first man, the one who had walked in the garden and spoken with God face to face. By the time Enoch was born, humanity had already begun to drift. The line of Cain had descended into violence, lust, and rebellion. Cities rose. Idols were carved. The songs of worship faded into the noise of ambition and greed. But in the line of Seth, there remained a flicker of light, a remnant who still prayed, who still remembered the Creator. Enoch was born into that line. From his youth, he was different. While other children played and chased after the pleasures of the world, Enoch would sit alone on the hillsides, watching the stars, whispering prayers into the silence. He did not seek power. He did not seek riches. He sought only one thing: to know God. And God heard him. Scripture says that Enoch walked with God for 300 years. Not in the way you and I walk down a street, but in the way a son walks beside his father, in trust, in obedience, in love. Every morning, Enoch would rise before the sun and pray. Every evening, he would offer thanks. His life became a living prayer, and the closer he drew to God, the more he began to see. He saw that the world was not as it seemed. That beneath the surface of daily life, a great battle was raging. A battle between light and darkness, between the faithful angels of heaven and those who had turned away. And then one day, God spoke to him. Enoch, the voice said, I have chosen you. You will see what no mortal has seen. You will write what no mortal has written, and your words will endure until the end of time. From that moment, Enoch's life was no longer his own. He became the scribe of heaven, the scribe of righteousness. Angels descended to guide him. Visions unfolded before his eyes. He was shown the layers of heaven, the paths of the stars, the fate of the fallen, and the future of mankind. And he wrote it all down, not for himself, but for us, for every generation that would come after, so that we would know the truth, so that we would understand what happened before the flood, and so that we would remember the justice and mercy of God. The Book of Enoch is not a work of imagination. It is a testimony, a record, a warning and a promise. It tells of the 200 angels who descended to earth and broke their sacred oath. It tells of the giants born from their union with human women. It tells of the spread of forbidden knowledge, of violence, and of corruption so deep that God himself grieved for having made mankind. And it tells of the flood, the great cleansing, the moment when God said, "Enough." But most of all, it tells of hope, of redemption, of a Savior who would one day come to restore what was lost. Enoch saw him, in a vision so bright, so glorious, that he fell to the ground and wept. He saw the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Ancient of Days, and he knew that one day all things would be made new. When Enoch had finished writing, he gathered his family. He held his son, Methuselah, and said, "Keep these words, guard them, for they are not mine. They are the words of the Lord." And then, one morning, Enoch walked out into the hills as he always did. But this time, he did not return. The sky opened, light poured down like a river, and Enoch was taken up. His family searched for him, but they found nothing. Only his writings remained. For centuries, those writings were copied and passed down. They were read in the synagogues, quoted by the apostles. The Epistle of Jude in the New Testament directly references the prophecy of Enoch, calling him the seventh from Adam and affirming that his words were true. But then, something changed. As the church grew in power, as councils were held and doctrines debated, the Book of Enoch was quietly set aside. It was too vivid, too detailed, too dangerous. It spoke of things the church could not easily explain, of angels who sinned, of giants, of other heavens, of mysteries that did not fit neatly into the theology of empire. And so it was removed, banned, forgotten. In the West, it vanished almost entirely. For over 1,000 years, most Christians did not even know it existed. But in Ethiopia, it was never forgotten. There, in ancient monasteries built into the sides of mountains, the Book of Enoch was copied by hand, generation after generation. In the Ge'ez language, unchanged, unedited, complete. And when European explorers finally reached Ethiopia in the 18th century, they were stunned to discover that the Ethiopians had been reading the Book of Enoch all along. In 1773, a Scottish traveller named James Bruce brought 3 copies back to Europe. Scholars translated them, and the world remembered what it had lost. Then, in 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the caves of Qumran. Among those ancient texts, written centuries before the birth of Christ, were fragments of the Book of Enoch. In Aramaic, the language Jesus himself spoke, and every word matched the Ethiopian version. This was not legend, not myth. This was history. The Book of Enoch had been real all along. Tonight, you are about to hear it in full. Not in pieces, not in summaries, but every chapter, every vision, every warning. We will walk with Enoch as he ascends through the 10 heavens. We will stand beside him as he witnesses the binding of the fallen angels. We will hear the cries of the giants. We will see the throne of God. And we will understand, perhaps for the first time, why the flood had to come. This is not just the story of the past. It is the story of now, of the battle that still rages, of the choice every soul must make. Will you walk with God as Enoch did? Or will you walk away, The answer begins here, in the words of a man who lived so faithfully that God could not bear to let him taste death. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, the scribe of heaven, the one who saw the end from the beginning. His words have waited long enough. Now, let us hear them. Chapter 2. The Watcher's Oath, on Mount Hermon. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, he also created the angels, countless hosts of them, beings of light and fire, each fashioned for a purpose. Some to guard the throne, some to carry his messages, some to move the stars and winds according to his will, and some were sent to watch over mankind. They were called the Watchers, 200 of them chosen from among the highest ranks of heaven. Their mission was simple: observe humanity, protect them from afar, remind them, when necessary, of the path of righteousness, but never interfere, never cross the boundary between the divine and the mortal. For centuries they obeyed. They stood upon the peaks of mountains, hidden among the clouds, silent and faithful. They watched as humanity multiplied across the earth. They saw children born, families formed, fields planted, and songs sung under the stars. And at first their hearts remained pure. But time is a strange thing, even for angels. And the longer they watched, the more they began to feel something they had never felt before: longing. They saw the beauty of human women, the way they laughed, the way they moved, the tenderness in their eyes when they held their children. And the Watchers began to desire what they were never meant to have. It started as a whisper, a fleeting thought, quickly dismissed. But the whisper returned, again and again, until it became a voice. And the voice became a temptation so strong that even the holiest among them could no longer ignore it. One of them, a high-ranking angel named Samyaza, also called Semjaza, spoke aloud what the others had only dared to think. "I desire to take a wife from among the daughters of men." The other Watchers turned to him, startled. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of those words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Then another angel, Azazel, stepped forward. "I feel it too," he said quietly. And then another, and another, until nearly all 200 of them stood together, their faces filled with conflict, shame, and something else: hope. That perhaps, if they were not alone in this, it would not be so wrong. But Samyaza was no fool. He understood what they were about to do, and he knew the cost. "Listen to me," he said, his voice heavy. "If I alone descend and commit this sin, I will bear the full punishment of God. But if we all descend together, if we share in this transgression, then we will share the consequence. None of us will face judgment alone." The others hesitated. They knew that what he was proposing was not just rebellion. It was a breaking of the sacred order, a violation of the boundary God himself had set between heaven and earth. But the desire was too strong, and the promise of not being alone made the fall seem almost bearable. And so they made a pact. They chose a mountain, a high, mist-covered peak in the land that would one day be called Hermon, a place where the clouds touched the earth and the earth touched the sky. There, under the stars, the 200 Watchers stood in a circle, and they swore an oath. Each one placed his hand upon the shoulder of the one beside him, forming an unbroken chain, and together they spoke the words that would seal their fate. "We bind ourselves by mutual curses. We pledge that we will not turn back from this plan. We will descend to the earth. We will take wives from among the daughters of men, and whatever comes, we will face it together." The name of that mountain, Hermon, means the place of the oath, but it could just as easily mean the place of the curse. For the moment those words were spoken, something shifted in the fabric of creation. The boundary was crossed. The angels who had once stood in the presence of God now turned their backs on heaven, and they fell. Not in the way Lucifer fell, in pride and rebellion, seeking to overthrow the throne. No, this was a different kind of fall. A fall born not of hatred, but of desire. Not of ambition, but of longing for something they were never meant to touch. They descended from the heights of Hermon like stars falling from the sky, and when their feet touched the earth, they were no longer entirely divine. They had become something else, something in between. The daughters of men saw them, and they were captivated. These were not ordinary men. They were taller, stronger, more beautiful than any human could be. Their eyes held the light of heaven. Their voices carried the echo of eternity, and the women did not resist. The watchers took wives, hundreds of them, and from those unions, children were born. But these were not ordinary children. They were giants. The Nephilim. Their height was monstrous. Some accounts say they stood 30 feet tall. Others say more. Their strength was beyond measure. One could uproot a tree with a single hand. Another could crush stone as if it were clay. At first, humanity marveled at them. They seemed like gods walking among men. Surely, they thought, these beings would protect us. Surely they would lead us into a golden age. But they were wrong. The Nephilim were not saviors. They were devourers. They had the appetites of angels and the bodies of beasts, and nothing on earth could satisfy them. They consumed entire harvests in a single day. They slaughtered herds of cattle and left nothing behind. And when the food ran out, they turned on humanity itself. The Book of Enoch records it plainly. They began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. And they devoured one another's flesh and drank the blood. Humanity had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. The world that had once been a garden was now a graveyard. And the angels who had caused it all stood by, watching the horror they had unleashed. Some of them felt regret. Some wept in silence. But none of them could undo what they had done. Azazel looked upon the chaos and whispered, "What have we done?" But there was no answer. Only the sound of screams rising from the valleys below. The oath they had made on Mount Hermon had bound them together, but it had also bound them to the consequences. And those consequences were only beginning. For in heaven the faithful angels had seen everything, and they were bringing the report before the throne of God. The reckoning was coming. But first there was more to come. More knowledge to be revealed. More boundaries to be broken. For the watchers did not only take wives and father giants, they also began to teach, and what they taught would corrupt humanity in ways that violence alone never could. Chapter 3. The Nephilim, giants born of sin. When the Nephilim were born, the earth trembled. Their mothers cried out in agony, for no human body was meant to carry such beings. The birth of a single Nephilim was like an earthquake. The ground shook, the air grew thick, and when the child finally emerged, it was already the size of a full-grown man. Within weeks, they grew larger. Within months, they towered over every living thing, and within a few short years, they became the terror of the earth. The name Nephilim comes from the Hebrew word naphal, which means to fall. They were the fallen ones, not because they fell from heaven, but because they were born from the union of those who had, half divine, half human, belonging fully to neither. They carried the strength of angels, but not the purity. They carried the will of men, but not the restraint. They were creatures of contradiction, and they could not find peace. At first, humanity tried to live alongside them. Villages offered tribute, food, livestock, hoping that if they gave enough, the giants would leave them alone. But the hunger of the Nephilim was endless. One giant could consume the entire grain store of a town in a single sitting. Another would devour 50 sheep before noon and demand more by evening. The fields could not keep up. The herds were wiped out. And when there was nothing left to give, the Nephilim began to take. They raided villages. They tore down homes. They crushed anyone who resisted beneath their feet. The Book of Enoch describes it in chilling detail. The giants consumed all the produce of the land, and when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. Mothers hid their children in caves. Fathers stood guard through the night, knowing they had no chance if a giant came. Entire communities fled into the mountains, hoping the giants would not follow. But they did, for the Nephilim were not only hungry, they were restless, violent, filled with a rage they could not explain and could not control. Perhaps it was because they knew, deep down, that they did not belong, that they were abominations, mistakes, and so they sought to destroy everything around them, as if by doing so they could erase the truth of their own existence. Some of the giants turned on each other. Brother fought brother. Tribe fought tribe. Their blood, thick and dark, ran like rivers across the land. The earth itself seemed to groan under the weight of their sin. Genesis chapter 6 verse 5 records the result. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. But it was not only the wickedness of man, it was the wickedness of the Nephilim, and the corruption that their very existence had spread. For the giants were not just violent, they were unnatural. They violated the order of creation simply by being alive. And God, who had made all things good, looked upon the world he had formed and saw that it had been defiled beyond recognition. The angels who had fathered the Nephilim watched in silence. Some wept, some turned away, but none of them could stop what they had started. Azazel, one of the chief watchers, did not weep. Instead, he did something even worse. He began to teach. Not wisdom, not righteousness, but the secrets of heaven, the knowledge that was never meant for mortal hands. He taught men how to forge swords from metal, how to craft shields and armor, how to make weapons of war. Before Azazel, men had fought with stones and sticks. Now, they fought with blades that could cut through bone, with spears that could pierce from a distance, with tools designed not to build, but to kill. And they used them. Against each other, against the giants, against anyone who stood in their way. Blood that had once been shed in accident or anger was now shed with precision, with intent, with craft. War became an art. And Azazel smiled, but he did not stop there. He also taught the women, not how to fight, but how to seduce, how to adorn themselves with jewelry and makeup, how to use beauty as a weapon. The Book of Enoch says, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates. And he taught women the art of beautifying the eyelids, and all kinds of precious stones, and coloring tinctures. He turned beauty into vanity, attraction into lust, love into possession. Another angel, Samyaza, taught the arts of enchantments and root-cutting, sorcery, the manipulation of plants and herbs to control, to curse, to deceive. Others taught astrology, the reading of signs in the stars, not to worship God, but to predict fate and claim power over the future. Still others taught divination, the summoning of spirits, and the making of charms. All of it was forbidden. All of it was knowledge meant to remain hidden, but the watchers gave it freely. And humanity, in its pride, accepted it eagerly. They thought they were becoming like gods, but they were becoming like demons. The violence spread, the corruption deepened, and the cries of the innocent rose higher and higher until they reached the very throne of heaven. The faithful angels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, stood before the Lord and said, "How long will you allow this to continue? The earth is drenched in blood. The Nephilim devour your children. The watchers have broken every sacred law." And God, who is slow to anger but perfect in justice, looked upon the earth once more, and he made his decision. The watchers would be bound, the Nephilim would be destroyed, and the earth would be cleansed, but not yet. First, there was one more witness, one more voice that had to be heard, a man who had walked faithfully with God, a man who had kept himself pure even as the world around him fell into darkness. His name was Enoch, and he was about to be called into the presence of the fallen angels themselves. Chapter 4. Forbidden Knowledge, Azazel's Teachings. There are some secrets that humanity was never meant to know, not because God wished to keep us ignorant, but because he knew we were not ready. That in our hands, certain knowledge would become a weapon, a poison, a door we could open but never close. The watchers knew this too. They had stood in the throne room of heaven. They had heard the counsel of the Almighty. They understood which mysteries were meant for angels alone, and yet they revealed them anyway. Chief among the rebellious teachers was Azazel. His name means God strengthens, but by the time he descended to earth, he had become the very opposite. He was the one who weakened humanity's connection to the divine, who turned their eyes away from heaven and toward the dust. Azazel did not simply fall. He led others into the fall. And once he stood upon the earth, he set about teaching men the one thing that would ensure their destruction: the art of war. Before Azazel, violence was clumsy. Men fought with their fists, with stones, with clubs of wood. Conflicts were brutal but brief. There were no armies, no strategies, no campaigns of conquest. But Azazel changed everything. He showed them metal, not just copper, which they had used for tools, but iron, hard, sharp, unyielding. He taught them how to heat it in fire until it glowed red, how to hammer it into shape, how to forge it into something that could cut through flesh and bone as easily as a knife through water. Swords, spears, daggers with edges so fine they could pierce a man's heart before he even knew he had been struck. The Book of Enoch records it plainly. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them. And once men held those weapons, everything changed. Disputes that had once been settled with words or fists now ended in blood. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Tribes attacked tribes. The strong no longer needed to negotiate with the weak. They simply took what they wanted, and those who resisted were slaughtered. Fields that had once grown wheat were now watered with blood. Villages that had once sung songs of harvest now burned in silence. The sword became the ruler of the earth. But Azazel did not stop there. He also taught the women, not how to fight, but how to manipulate, how to wield beauty as a weapon, just as sharp as any blade. He showed them how to grind minerals into powders to color their eyelids, how to fashion jewelry from gold and silver to draw the eyes of men, how to cut gemstones and wear them as symbols of status and desire. The Book of Enoch says he taught them about bracelets, ornaments, the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones and coloring tinctures. Before Azazel, beauty had been simple, natural, a reflection of the image of God in every soul. But now, beauty became a mask, a tool, a way to deceive. Women no longer sought to be seen as faithful, as wise, as kind. They sought to be seen as desirable. And men no longer sought women for companionship, for partnership in life. They sought them for possession. Lust replaced love. Pride replaced humility. And vanity spread like wildfire across the human heart. Azazel watched it all with satisfaction. He had not simply taught humanity new skills. He had taught them to turn away from God, to worship the creation instead of the Creator, to trust in their own power instead of divine grace. And once that seed was planted, it grew in every direction. Other watchers followed his example. An angel named Semjaza, the leader of the 200, taught the arts of enchantment, the cutting of roots, the mixing of herbs to create potions that could cloud the mind, curse an enemy, or bind someone's will. He showed men how to speak incantations, how to call upon spirits that were not of God, how to draw symbols in the dirt that would summon forces from the shadows. Magic, in its darkest form, entered the world. Another angel, named Armoros, taught humanity how to break enchantments, not to protect them from evil, but to give them power over one another. So that sorcerer could fight sorcerer, and no man would ever feel safe again. Barachiel taught astrology. He showed them the movements of the stars and planets, and convinced them that their fates were written in the sky, that their lives were governed not by God, but by cosmic forces beyond their control. Hope turned to fatalism. Prayer turned to divination. Kokabeel revealed the knowledge of the constellations, not to marvel at God's creation, but to read omens, to predict wars, to justify violence by claiming the stars had ordained it. Ezekiel taught the knowledge of clouds, how to read the weather, how to interpret signs in the sky. Again, not to give thanks to the provider, but to claim mastery over nature. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth, how to read tremors, how to predict floods and droughts. Knowledge that could have been used to save lives, but instead was hoarded by the powerful and used to control the fearful. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, when to plant, when to reap, but also when to wage war, when to strike, when to march. And Sariel, whose name means God's command, taught the course of the moon, the cycles, the rhythms, knowledge that should have brought peace and order. But in the hands of the fallen, it became another tool of manipulation. All of this knowledge, the Book of Enoch tells us, was forbidden, not because it was false, but because humanity was not ready. Because without the fear of God, without humility, without love, knowledge becomes a curse. Men used what they learned to dominate each other. Women used it to deceive. Leaders used it to justify cruelty. And no one, not one single soul, stopped to ask whether they should. They only asked whether they could. And so the world fell deeper into darkness, not slowly, not gradually, but like a stone thrown into a bottomless pit, faster and faster, until no one could remember what light had even looked like. The faithful grew fewer, the violent grew bolder, and the cries of the innocent reached a pitch so loud that even the angels in heaven could no longer bear to listen. But God heard. He had been watching, waiting, giving humanity every chance to turn back. And now, the time for mercy was running out. For the earth was not only filled with violence, it was filled with abomination. The very order of creation had been shattered. The Nephilim roamed unchecked. The watchers taught without restraint, and the blood of the innocent soaked into the ground, crying out for justice. High in the heavens, the faithful angels stood before the throne, and they said, "How long, O Lord? How long will you allow this to continue?" And God, whose patience is beyond measure but whose justice is absolute, gave his answer. Prepare the judgment. Chapter 5. The cry of earth reaches heaven. There comes a moment in every story of rebellion when the consequences can no longer be delayed. a moment when mercy has been offered again and again and refused. A moment when the cries of the innocent have piled so high that they can no longer be ignored. For the earth, that moment had come. The blood of the murdered soaked into the soil. The tears of widows and orphans filled the rivers. The groans of men crushed beneath the feet of giants echoed through the valleys. And all of it, every cry, every whisper, every silent scream, rose up like smoke toward the throne of God. The Book of Enoch records it with haunting clarity. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. The earth itself spoke, not with words, but with a voice deeper than words. A groan that came from the very foundation of creation. The ground that had been made to bring forth life was now drenched in death. The soil that had been blessed to produce grain now produced only graves. And the earth cried out, "How long, O Lord?" In heaven, the faithful angels heard it. 4 of them stood closest to the throne, 4 whose names are written in light, whose presence burns with the purity of God's own glory. Michael, the commander of the armies of heaven, the one who stands for the people of God, the defender, the warrior. His name means, "Who is like God?" A question that is also a declaration. No one. No one is like God. Gabriel, the messenger, the one who carries the word of the Lord to those who need to hear it most. His name means, "God is my strength," and in his voice, the strength of heaven itself resides. Raphael, the healer, the one who mends what is broken and restores what has been lost. His name means God heals, and wherever he goes, hope follows. And Uriel, the light of God, the one who illuminates the darkness and reveals what is hidden. His name means God is my light, and in his presence no lie can stand. These 4 stood before the throne, and they had seen everything. They had watched as the watchers descended. They had witnessed the birth of the Nephilim. They had seen the teachings of Azazel spread like a plague. They had heard the prayers of the faithful grow fewer and quieter, until only a handful of voices still called upon the name of the Lord, and they could bear it no longer. Michael stepped forward first. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of sorrow. "Lord of all ages," he said, "you see what Azazel has done. He has taught every form of unrighteousness upon the earth. He has revealed the eternal secrets which were kept in heaven, and because of him, men commit murder without end." Gabriel spoke next. "The souls of those who have died cry out. They plead for justice. They ask, 'How long will our blood remain unavenged?'" Raphael's voice was softer, but no less urgent. "The spirits of men are being destroyed. The earth groans under the weight of corruption. If this continues, there will be nothing left to heal." And Uriel, whose light revealed all things, said simply, "The darkness has grown so deep that even the righteous can barely see. Lord, if you do not act, the light will be extinguished forever." There was silence in heaven, not the peaceful silence of rest, but the heavy silence of a decision being made. The kind of silence that comes before thunder. And then the voice of God. It did not roar. It did not shout. It was calm, steady, final. "Hear me, my faithful ones. The time has come. I will not allow this corruption to continue. The watchers will be bound. The Nephilim will be destroyed, and the earth will be cleansed." The 4 angels bowed. "What would you have us do, Lord?" And God gave each of them a command. "Uriel," he said, "go to Noah, the son of Lamech. Tell him what is coming. Instruct him to hide himself, for I am about to bring a flood upon the earth. And tell him to build an ark, that he and his family may be saved, and that the seed of life may continue." Uriel vanished in an instant, his form dissolving into light. Raphael, God continued, go to Azazel. Bind him hand and foot. Cast him into the darkness. Cover him with jagged stones in the desert of Dudael. Let him remain there until the day of judgment. And on that day he will be thrown into the fire. Raphael nodded and departed, his face set with both grief and resolve. Gabriel, the Lord said, go to the Nephilim. Set them one against another. Let them destroy each other in battle. For they were born of sin, and by violence they shall fall. Gabriel's eyes burned with righteous fire. He turned and descended toward the earth like a streak of lightning. And finally, God spoke to Michael. Go to Semjaza and to all who joined him in taking wives. Bind them beneath the hills of the earth for 70 generations, until the day of their judgment and consummation. And when that day comes, they will be led away to the abyss of fire, where they will be tormented forever. Michael, the greatest of all the archangels, knelt. It will be done, Lord. And then he too descended. The 4 angels of heaven moved with the speed of thought and the power of the Almighty behind them. Uriel appeared to Noah as he worked in his vineyard. The old man fell to his knees, trembling, for the light of the angel was too bright to bear. Do not be afraid, Noah, Uriel said. You have found favor in the eyes of the Lord. A great flood is coming. You must prepare. Build an ark of gopher wood and cover it with pitch inside and out. Bring into it your family, and 2 of every living creature. For I tell you truly, everything else will be swept away. Noah's voice shook. But why, my lord? Why must the world be destroyed? Uriel's face was filled with sadness. Because the sons of heaven have mingled with the daughters of men. Because violence fills the earth. Because the cries of the innocent have reached the throne of God, and he will no longer allow it to continue. Noah wept, but he obeyed. Meanwhile, Raphael descended into the desert. He found Azazel standing among the ruins of a village, watching as men fought each other with the swords he had taught them to make. Azazel turned and saw the angel approaching, and for the first time since his fall, he felt fear. Raphael, he said, his voice hoarse, have you come to gloat? No, Raphael replied. I have come to bind you. Azazel tried to flee, but he could not. The chains of heaven, invisible but unbreakable, wrapped around his wrists and ankles. He fell to the ground, powerless. Raphael's voice was calm. You will be cast into darkness, Azazel, and there you will remain until the day of judgment. And on that day you will answer for every soul you have destroyed. Azazel screamed, but no one heard him, for Raphael carried him deep into the desert, to a place called Dudael, a barren wasteland where no living thing grew. There he threw Azazel into a pit and covered him with sharp, jagged stones. The earth sealed over him, and the light was gone. Gabriel, meanwhile, moved among the Nephilim. He did not need to strike them down himself. He simply whispered into their hearts. Pride, suspicion, rage. The giants, who had once worked together to terrorize humanity, now turned on each other. Brother fought brother. Tribe fought tribe. Their great strength, which had been used to crush the innocent, was now used to destroy themselves. The earth shook with their battles. Their blood ran in rivers. And one by one, they fell. And finally, Michael descended to the place where Semjaza and the other watchers had gathered, high on a mountain, watching the chaos they had unleashed. When they saw Michael, they knew. They had always known this day would come. Semjaza stepped forward. Will you bind us, Michael? We who were once your brothers. Michael's face was like stone. You are no longer my brothers. You broke the sacred law. You defiled the earth, and now you will pay the price. Chains of light, forged in the fires of heaven, wrapped around each of the watchers. They fell to their knees, powerless. Michael's voice rang out like thunder. You will be bound beneath the earth for 70 generations. And when the time of judgment comes, you will be cast into the eternal fire, where you will remain forever. The watchers wept. They pleaded, but there was no mercy. For mercy had already been offered, and they had refused it. The earth opened beneath them, and they were dragged down into the darkness. The ground sealed over them, and they were gone. In heaven, the 4 angels returned to the throne. It is done, Lord, they said, and God looked upon the earth once more. The Nephilim were destroying themselves. The watchers were bound, and Noah was building the ark. Soon the rain would come, and the world would begin again. Chapter 6. The Binding of the Watchers. There are moments in history when heaven itself descends to earth, not in whispers, not in dreams, but in power so absolute that the ground trembles and the sky splits open. This was one of those moments. The 4 archangels had received their commands, and now the judgment of God was about to be executed. Michael, the commander of heaven's armies, stood upon the peak of Mount Hermon, the very place where the watchers had sworn their cursed oath, the place where 200 angels had bound themselves together in rebellion. Now, Michael had come to bind them in a different way. The watchers were scattered across the earth. Some stood among the ruins of cities they had helped destroy. Others hid in caves, trembling at the growing realization that their time was running out. A few remained defiant, convinced that God would not truly judge them. They were wrong. Michael raised his hand, and his voice rang out across the earth like a trumpet blast. Semjaza, Azazel, Armaros, Barakiel, all you who descended from heaven and defiled the earth, by the command of the Most High, your time has come. The sky darkened, thunder rolled across the mountains, and from the heavens, chains of light descended. Not chains of metal, not chains that could rust or break. These were chains forged from the very authority of God himself, unbreakable, eternal. Semjaza, the leader of the watchers, stood among his fellow rebels. He had known this day would come. Deep down, he had always known. But knowing did not make it easier. He looked at the others. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with fear and regret. Some of them wept openly. Others stood in silence, their shoulders slumped in defeat. We should have listened, one of them whispered. We should never have come down. Semjaza said nothing. There was nothing left to say. Michael descended before them, his form blazing with the glory of heaven. His wings stretched wide, each feather edged with fire. His eyes burned with righteous judgment, but there was no hatred in them, only sorrow. You were my brothers once, Michael said quietly. You stood with me in the presence of the Lord. You sang with us in the courts of heaven, and you threw it all away. Semjaza lifted his head. We did not intend for this to happen. We only wanted— You wanted what was not yours to have, Michael interrupted. You crossed a boundary that God himself had set, and because of you, thousands have died. The earth has been corrupted, and the blood of the innocent cries out for justice. The chains descended. One by one, they wrapped around the wrists and ankles of the watchers. The angels tried to resist, but their strength was nothing compared to the power of heaven. They fell to their knees, bound and powerless. Michael's voice was steady. By the command of the Lord, you will be bound beneath the earth for 70 generations. You will dwell in darkness, in the valleys of the earth, until the day of the great judgment. And on that day you will be led into the abyss of fire, where you will remain forever." The watchers cried out. Some begged for mercy, others cursed, but it made no difference. The ground beneath them began to crack. A chasm opened, deep and black, stretching down into the very heart of the earth. And one by one, the watchers were dragged down into the darkness. Semjaza was the last to fall. As the earth swallowed him, he looked up at Michael one final time. "Tell him," Semjaza said, his voice breaking. "Tell the Lord that we are sorry." Michael's face did not change. "You should have been sorry before you fell." And with that, Semjaza vanished into the abyss. The ground sealed over him, and the watchers were gone, but the judgment was not finished. In the desert of Dudael, far from any city or town, Raphael stood over the bound form of Azazel. Azazel, the teacher of forbidden knowledge, the one who had shown men how to make swords and wage war, the one who had taught women to adorn themselves in vanity and pride. He had been the most eager of all the watchers, the most willing to share the secrets of heaven, and now he would pay the highest price. Raphael looked down at him with eyes full of sadness. "You were given so much, Azazel. You were trusted with the mysteries of creation, and you used them to destroy." Azazel glared up at him, defiant to the end. "I gave humanity power. I gave them knowledge. Is that so wrong?" "You gave them tools they were not ready for," Raphael replied. "You gave them swords before they learned mercy. You gave them beauty before they understood humility. You gave them magic before they knew wisdom. And because of you, the world is drowning in blood." Azazel's defiance wavered. For a moment, something like regret flickered in his eyes. But it was too late. Raphael raised his hand, and the earth opened beneath Azazel. A pit, deeper than any grave, darker than any night. Azazel was thrown into it, and then sharp stones, jagged and rough, rained down upon him. They covered him completely, sealing him in darkness and pain. The Book of Enoch records the command of God: "Cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever. Cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire." Azazel's screams echoed through the desert, but no one heard them. No one came to save him. He was alone, and he would remain alone until the end of time. Meanwhile, Gabriel moved among the Nephilim. The giants, the offspring of the watchers and the daughters of men, had grown so numerous and so violent that they had become the terror of the earth. But Gabriel did not need to fight them. He did not need to raise a sword or call down fire from heaven. He simply whispered. Into the hearts of the giants he planted seeds of pride, suspicion, and rage. He turned brother against brother, tribe against tribe, clan against clan. The giants, who had once united in their cruelty, now turned their strength upon each other. The battles were horrific. The earth shook beneath their feet. Their roars echoed through the valleys, and their blood, thick and dark, flowed like rivers. One giant would crush another beneath a boulder. Another would tear his opponent apart with his bare hands. The violence was endless, brutal, complete, and Gabriel watched in silence as they destroyed themselves. The Book of Enoch says, "Proceed against them and incite them one against another. Let them perish by mutual slaughter, for length of days they shall not have." It was not cruelty, it was justice. For the giants had been born of sin, and by violence they had lived. Now, by violence, they would fall. Within weeks, most of the Nephilim were dead. Their bodies lay scattered across the earth, monuments to the consequences of rebellion. But their spirits did not rest. For they were neither fully human nor fully divine, and when they died, their souls had nowhere to go. They could not ascend to heaven, for they had never belonged there. They could not rest in the earth, for they were not fully mortal. And so they became something else, wandering spirits, restless, hungry, filled with rage and confusion. They became the demons that would haunt humanity for generations to come. The Book of Enoch explains it clearly. The spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth. They take no food, but thirst and hunger and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. The Nephilim were gone, but their spirits remained, and they would continue to torment mankind until the day of final judgment. High in the heavens, the 4 archangels returned to the throne of God. They knelt before him, their faces bowed. "It is done, Lord," Michael said. "The watchers are bound. Azazel is sealed in the desert. The Nephilim have destroyed themselves, and Noah is preparing the ark." God looked upon them with approval. "You have done well, my faithful ones. But the work is not yet finished. The earth is still defiled. The blood of the innocent still cries out, and the hearts of men are still filled with violence." The angels waited in silence. "Soon," God said, "the rain will come, and the world will be washed clean. But before that day, there is one more task." "What would you have us do, Lord?" Michael asked. "Go to Enoch," God said. "Bring him before me, for he has walked faithfully in a faithless generation, and I will show him the full measure of what has been lost and what is yet to come." The angels bowed and departed. And in the valleys below, Enoch, the 7th from Adam, looked up at the sky and saw the light descending toward him. He did not know what was about to happen. He did not know that he was about to be taken on a journey through the very fabric of creation. But he trusted, and he waited, for he had walked with God all his life, and now God was about to show him the greatest mysteries of heaven and earth. Chapter 7. Enoch's Journey Through the 10 Heavens. There are places the human eye was never meant to see, realms beyond the reach of mortal understanding, layers of creation so vast, so intricate, that to glimpse even one would overwhelm the soul. But Enoch was about to see them all. He stood alone in a quiet valley, the evening sky turning gold above him. He had been praying, as he always did, when the light appeared. At first, it was small, a single point of brilliance in the distance. But it grew, it spread, and within moments, it surrounded him completely. Enoch fell to his knees, trembling. The light was warm, but it carried a weight, a presence. He knew, without being told, that this was no ordinary light. A voice spoke, gentle but impossible to ignore. "Enoch." He lifted his head, but he could not see who was speaking. The light was too bright. "Do not be afraid," the voice said. "You have been chosen. The Lord has called you to witness what no man has seen. You will ascend through the heavens. You will behold the mysteries of creation, and you will write down all that you see, so that future generations may know the truth." Enoch's voice was barely a whisper. "I am not worthy, my Lord." "No man is worthy," the voice replied. "But you have walked faithfully, and that is enough." The light grew brighter still, and then, without warning, Enoch felt himself lifted from the ground. He was rising, higher and higher. The earth fell away beneath him, shrinking until it was nothing but a distant sphere, and ahead of him the heavens opened. The first heaven was a place of motion. Winds swirled around him, vast and powerful, but perfectly ordered. He saw great storehouses carved into the fabric of the sky, filled with snow, hail, rain, and mist. Angels stood guard over each one, their faces calm and focused. They did not speak. They simply worked, opening and closing the gates according to the will of God. "These are the treasuries of the weather," the angel beside Enoch said. "From here the Lord sends rain to the earth. From here he commands the snow and the wind. All things move according to his word." Enoch watched in awe. He had always known that God controlled the weather, but he had never imagined it like this. So precise, so deliberate. The second heaven was darker. Here, the light was dim, almost mournful. Enoch saw angels standing in rows, their heads bowed. They did not sing. They did not move. "These are the angels who wait," his guide said. "They watch over the souls of men who have died but have not yet been judged. They record every deed, every word, every thought. Nothing is forgotten." Enoch felt a chill. He realized in that moment how much of his own life had been seen, how much had been written down. But he also felt relief, for he had walked with God, and he knew that his deeds, though imperfect, had been offered in faith. The third heaven was divided. On one side, a garden of light, trees with golden leaves, rivers of crystal water, and souls dressed in white, singing songs of praise. On the other side, darkness, a pit of shadow, where cries of anguish rose up like smoke. "This is where the souls of the dead are kept until the day of judgment," the angel said. "The righteous rest in peace. The wicked suffer in torment. And between them is a great chasm that cannot be crossed." Enoch wept. He saw faces he recognized, some in the light, some in the darkness, and he understood, more deeply than ever before, that every choice mattered. In the fourth heaven, Enoch beheld the sun and the moon. They moved along paths of light, great wheels of fire and silver, guided by angels whose voices sang in harmony with the turning of the spheres. "The sun rises and sets according to the command of God," the angel said. "It does not stray from its course. It does not grow weary. It obeys." Enoch marveled. For all his life, he had watched the sun rise, but he had never understood that it was a living act of obedience. The fifth heaven was filled with the spirits of those who had been taken before their time, children who had died in innocence, men and women who had been murdered, souls who cried out for justice. "They wait," the angel said, "and on the day of judgment they will be vindicated. Every tear will be wiped away. Every wrong will be made right." Enoch's heart ached, but he also felt hope, for he knew that God had not forgotten them. The sixth heaven was the place of punishment. Here Enoch saw the watchers, bound in chains of darkness, suspended in a valley of fire. They screamed, they wept, they pleaded for mercy, but there was none. "These are the angels who sinned," the guide said. "They will remain here until the day of the great judgment, and then they will be cast into the eternal fire." Enoch turned away. He could not bear to look at them for long. They had once been glorious, and now they were nothing. In the seventh heaven, Enoch stood before the throne. He could not describe it. Words were not enough. Light was not enough. It was as if all the beauty, all the power, all the love in the universe had been gathered into one place. And at the center of it all, the Ancient of Days, God himself. Enoch fell on his face. He could not speak. He could not think. He could only worship. "Enoch," the voice said, and it was the same voice he had heard in the valley. But now it was everything. "You have seen what I have made. You have seen the order of creation. You have seen the consequences of sin. And you have seen the place prepared for the righteous." Enoch could only nod. his face still pressed to the ground. "Now," God said, "you will write. You will record all that you have seen, and your words will endure until the end of time. For I am sending a flood upon the earth, and after the flood men will forget. But your words will remind them." Enoch lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. "Yes, Lord, I will write." And then, gently, he was lowered back to the earth. He stood once more in the quiet valley. The sky was dark. The stars shone above him. But he was no longer the same man. He had seen the heavens, and he would never forget. Chapter 8. The Son of Man Vision. After Enoch returned from his journey through the heavens, he thought he had seen everything. He had witnessed the storehouses of the winds. He had stood before the souls of the righteous and the wicked. He had seen the bound watchers trembling in their chains. He had even knelt before the throne of the Ancient of Days. But God was not finished with him yet. One night, as Enoch sat alone on the mountainside, writing down all he had seen, the sky opened once more. This time, the light that descended was different. It was not the overwhelming brilliance of the seventh heaven. It was softer, warmer, like the first light of dawn after a long, dark night. And within that light, a figure appeared. He was tall, radiant, clothed in garments whiter than snow. His face shone like the sun, but Enoch could look upon it without fear. His eyes were deep, filled with both power and compassion. Enoch stood, his heart pounding. "Who are you?" he whispered. The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, he gestured for Enoch to follow. And suddenly, Enoch was no longer on the mountain. He was standing in a place beyond time. A place where past, present, and future all existed at once. Before him stretched a vast expanse, and at the center of it he saw a throne, greater than any he had seen before, more glorious, more terrible. Upon that throne sat the Ancient of Days, just as Enoch had seen him in the seventh heaven. His hair was white as wool. His robe blazed with light, and around him 10,000 times 10,000 angels bowed in worship. But this time Enoch saw something else. At the right hand of the Ancient of Days stood another figure, the same one who had appeared to him in the light, and the voice of God spoke, "Enoch, behold the Son of Man. He was chosen before the foundations of the world were laid. In him dwells all righteousness. Through him the hidden things will be revealed. And by him the wicked will be judged and the righteous will be saved." Enoch's knees buckled. He fell to the ground, his face pressed into the dust. "Who is he, Lord?" Enoch asked. "Where does he come from?" "He comes from me," God said. "Before the sun and the stars were made, before the earth took shape, he was with me. And in the days to come he will descend to the earth. He will walk among men. He will be rejected, despised, and killed. But through his death, the way to eternal life will be opened." Enoch wept, not out of sorrow, but out of awe. He was witnessing something that would not happen for thousands of years, something the prophets would long to see, something even the angels desired to understand. He was seeing the Messiah. The Son of Man stood before the throne, and all the angels bowed before him, not in the way they bowed before the Ancient of Days, but in honor, in reverence, for he was the chosen one, the anointed, the hope of all creation. Then the vision shifted. Enoch saw the earth, but it was not the earth as he knew it. It was the earth in the days to come, after the flood, after nations rose and fell, after empires came and went. He saw cities filled with people who had forgotten God. He saw idols erected in every town square. He saw the powerful crushing the weak. He saw lies spoken as truth, and truth cast aside as lies. And he saw the Son of Man descending, not in glory, as Enoch had expected, but in humility, as a man, born of a woman, wrapped in flesh, vulnerable, mortal. Enoch watched as this man walked among the people. He healed the sick. He raised the dead. He spoke words that pierced the heart and awakened the soul. But the people did not receive him. The rulers mocked him. The priests condemned him. And the crowds, who had once followed him, turned away. Enoch saw him betrayed, arrested, beaten, and finally nailed to a wooden cross, lifted high between heaven and earth. And as he hung there, the sky darkened, the earth shook, and the veil that separated the holy place from the presence of God was torn in two. Enoch cried out, "Why, Lord? Why must he suffer?" And the voice of God answered, "Because this is the only way. Sin demands a price. Death demands a sacrifice. And only one who is both God and man can pay it. Through his death, the curse will be broken. Through his blood, the door to heaven will be opened. And through his resurrection, death itself will be defeated." The vision shifted again. Now Enoch saw the Son of Man rising from the grave. The stone rolled away, the grave clothes left behind, and he walked out, alive, victorious, radiant with the glory of heaven. Angels descended and bowed before him. The righteous who had died rose with him, and the power of death was shattered. Then Enoch saw the final day. The sky split open. The trumpet sounded, and the Son of Man returned, not as a suffering servant, but as a conquering king. He descended with 10,000 of his holy ones, just as Enoch himself had prophesied. His eyes were like flames of fire. His voice was like the sound of many waters. And every knee, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, bowed before him. The dead rose from their graves. The living were gathered, and all stood before the throne of judgment. Books were opened. Every deed, every word, every thought was brought to light. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was forgotten. The righteous, those who had kept faith in the Most High, were clothed in white. Their faces shone like the sun, and they were welcomed into the eternal kingdom where there would be no more tears, no more pain, no more death. But the wicked, those who had rejected God, who had lived for themselves, who had crushed the innocent and mocked the righteous, were cast into the outer darkness, into the place prepared for the devil and his angels, a place of fire and torment where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Enoch saw it all, and he understood. This was not cruelty, this was justice. For every soul had been given a choice. Every heart had been shown the light, and those who turned away had chosen their own fate. The Son of Man did not condemn them. They condemned themselves. But for those who believed, for those who trusted, for those who held fast to faith even in the darkest night, there was a reward beyond imagining. They would dwell in the presence of God forever. They would walk in gardens of light. They would drink from rivers of life, and they would see the face of the Son of Man, the one who had loved them enough to die for them. The vision began to fade. Enoch found himself once more on the mountain, his face wet with tears, his heart burning with what he had seen. The angel stood beside him. "Write this down," the angel said. "Write every word, for the generations to come must know. They must understand. The Son of Man is coming, and every soul must be ready." Enoch nodded. His hands trembled as he reached for his scroll, and he began to write. "I saw the Son of Man. He was with the Ancient of Days, and all judgment was given to him. The righteous will rejoice in his presence, but the wicked will flee from his face. Blessed are those who trust in him, for they will inherit eternal life. These words, written thousands of years before the birth of Christ, became one of the most powerful prophecies in all of Scripture. And when Jesus walked the earth, he called himself by the same title Enoch had seen in the vision. The Son of Man, not the Son of David, not the King of Israel, but the Son of Man, the one who belonged not to one nation, but to all humanity, the one who would redeem not just Israel, but the world. Enoch had seen him, and now we can see him too. For the vision was not just for Enoch's time, it was for ours. The Son of Man is still calling, still waiting, still offering the same choice. Will you receive him, or will you turn away? The answer will determine everything. Chapter 9. The Astronomical Book, Heavenly Calendar. After the visions of judgment and redemption, Enoch was taken to a place few souls have ever entered. Not a place of punishment or reward, not a throne room or a valley of fire, but a place of order, of precision, of the quiet, faithful rhythm that holds all creation together. He was taken to the gates of heaven, where the light itself is measured and released according to the will of God. The angel who guided him was Uriel. His name means, God is my light. And he stood at the threshold between eternity and time, between the infinite and the measurable. Uriel's face was calm, but his eyes carried the depth of one who had watched the stars turn for countless ages. Enoch, Uriel said, you have seen the fall of the watchers. You have witnessed the judgment of the wicked. You have beheld the Son of Man in glory. But now you must see something else, something that most men never think about, but upon which everything depends. Enoch looked at him, confused. What is it, my lord? The order of creation, Uriel said. The movements of the heavens, the laws that govern time itself. For if men do not understand these things, they will lose their way. They will forget the appointed times. They will no longer know when to worship, when to rest, when to remember the works of God. And with that, Uriel stretched out his hand, and Enoch saw the gates, 12 gates of light, set in the eastern sky, and 12 more in the west, each one perfectly aligned, each one opening and closing according to a pattern so precise, so perfect, that Enoch could only stand in awe. These are the gates of the sun, Uriel explained. Through these, the light enters the world, and through these it departs. Watch. Enoch watched. He saw the sun, not as a distant ball of fire, but as a living chariot of light, drawn by angels through the sky. It entered through one of the eastern gates at dawn, traveled across the heavens, and departed through the corresponding western gate at dusk. Every day, Uriel said, the sun rises through a different gate. In the summer, it rises through the northern gates, and the days are long. In the winter, it rises through the southern gates, and the days are short. But always, it follows the path laid out by the Creator. It does not stray. It does not falter. It obeys. Enoch felt a deep reverence settle over him. He had watched the sun rise every morning of his life, but he had never understood that it was an act of obedience, a daily testimony to the faithfulness of God. And the moon? Enoch asked. Uriel smiled. Come, I will show you. The moon moved differently. It did not blaze like the sun, but shone with a softer, reflected light. Uriel explained that the moon waxed and waned according to a perfect cycle, 29 days. Then it disappeared, and a new cycle began. The moon marks the months, Uriel said, and the months mark the seasons, and the seasons mark the years. All of it is measured, all of it is known. Nothing is left to chance. Then Uriel led Enoch deeper into the heavens, to the place where the stars themselves were kept. There were thousands of them, millions, each one a living light placed in the sky by the hand of God. And each one moved along its own path, never crossing, never colliding, always in harmony. "These are the stars," Uriel said, "and they too have their purpose. They mark the signs, they guide the travelers, and they declare the glory of the one who made them." Enoch watched as the stars turned in great wheels across the sky. Some moved quickly, others slowly, but all of them moved together like a choir singing in perfect unison. "How is this possible?" Enoch whispered. "Because the Creator spoke it into being," Uriel said, "and what he speaks endures. The heavens obey because they know his voice, and as long as they obey, the earth will endure." Then Uriel turned to Enoch with a serious expression. "But men do not always obey," he said. "They create their own calendars. They invent their own systems. And in doing so, they drift away from the rhythm God has set. That is why you must write this down, so that future generations will know the true calendar, the calendar of heaven." And so Enoch wrote. He recorded the movements of the sun through the 12 gates. He documented the cycle of the moon. He mapped the paths of the stars. And he described the perfect year as it was ordained by God. 364 days. Not 365, as the nations would later calculate, but 364, a number perfectly divisible by 7, 52 weeks exactly. A year that always began on the same day of the week. A year that honored the Sabbath, the holy day of rest, in every cycle. This was the calendar used by the priests in the temple, the calendar kept by the righteous, the calendar that aligned with the rhythms of heaven itself. But over time, it was forgotten, replaced by calendars based on the moon alone, or the sun alone, or a mixture of both. And as the calendar changed, the people began to lose their sense of sacred time. They no longer knew when the true Sabbath fell. They celebrated feasts on the wrong days. They lost the rhythm that connected them to the Creator, and Uriel knew this would happen. That is why he showed Enoch everything in such detail, so that one day, when the world had forgotten, someone would read Enoch's words and remember. The Astronomical book, as it came to be called, is not just a record of the stars. It is a testimony, a reminder that God is a God of order, that he does not work in chaos, that every sunrise, every moonrise, every turn of the heavens is a gift, a sign, a faithful promise that he is still here. Enoch stood before the gates of light, his heart full. "Thank you," he said to Uriel. "Thank you for showing me this." Uriel nodded. "Do not forget it, Enoch, for the day will come when men will say that the heavens move by chance, that there is no hand guiding them, that the universe is nothing but cold, empty space. But you have seen the truth. You know better." Enoch smiled. "I will write it all down, every gate, every cycle, every star, so that no one can say they were not told." And he did. The Astronomical Book of Enoch remains one of the most detailed ancient records of celestial movements ever written. It shows that long before modern science, long before telescopes and satellites, there were those who understood the heavens, not because they studied them as objects, but because they saw them as the handiwork of God. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The stars do not exist to be worshipped. They exist to point us to the one who made them. Every sunrise is a reminder that he is faithful. Every full moon is a testimony that he keeps his promises. Every turn of the seasons is a sign that his love endures. And if we are wise, we will not look at the heavens and see only light. We will see the hand that holds the light, and we will worship him. Chapter 10. Dream Visions. History of the World. After Enoch had written down the movements of the heavens, after he had recorded the paths of the sun and moon and stars, he thought his work was finished. But one night, as he lay down to rest, sleep came over him like a wave, and in that sleep he dreamed. But this was not an ordinary dream. It was a vision, clear, vivid, more real than waking life itself. He saw the earth from the very beginning, from the moment God spoke light into existence, and he watched as all of history unfolded before his eyes, from the Garden of Eden to the end of days. But it was shown to him in a way he had never expected, in symbols, in allegory, in the forms of animals. The first vision came suddenly. Enoch saw a white bull, noble, strong, perfect in every way. It stood alone in a vast green field, and the light of heaven shone upon it. This was Adam. Then from the side of the white bull came another, a heifer, pure and gentle. This was Eve. Enoch watched as the two stood together in peace. The garden around them was filled with every good thing, trees heavy with fruit, rivers flowing clear, and above them the presence of God like a warm golden light. But then a shadow appeared. A black creature, serpentine and cunning, slithered into the garden. It whispered, it coiled, it deceived, and the white bull and the heifer ate from the tree they were commanded not to touch. The light above them dimmed, the garden began to fade, and they were driven out, east of Eden, into a land of thorns and toil. Enoch's heart ached as he watched, for he knew this story. He had heard it from his father and his father before him. But seeing it unfold, even in a dream, filled him with sorrow. Then the vision continued. From the white bull and the heifer came two offspring. One was a red calf, fierce and angry. The other was a white calf, gentle and obedient. Cain and Abel. Enoch watched as the red calf turned on the white calf and struck it down. Blood spilled onto the ground. The earth opened its mouth and cried out, and the red calf was driven away, marked and wandering, never to find rest. But from the white bull came another offspring, a pure white calf. This was Seth, and from Seth a line of white cattle continued. Enoch saw his own ancestors among them, men and women who walked with God, who kept the faith, who prayed and offered sacrifices. But then the vision darkened. Enoch saw a group of stars fall from the sky. They descended to the earth and took the form of great, shining beings. These were the Watchers, and they mingled with the cattle of the earth, with the daughters of men. From that union came creatures unlike anything the world had ever seen. Elephants, camels, donkeys, each one representing a different kind of giant, a different tribe of the Nephilim. They were enormous, they were violent, and they devoured everything in their path. The cattle of the earth, the human beings, fled in terror. They hid in caves. They cried out for help, but there was no one to save them, until the vision shifted once more. Enoch saw 4 figures descend from heaven, not stars this time, but beings of pure light. The archangels. They moved swiftly. One bound the fallen stars in chains. Another set the giants against each other, so that they destroyed themselves. A third went to a single white bull, one who stood apart from all the others, and whispered instructions to him. This was Noah. Enoch watched as Noah built a great vessel, a floating house of wood, and he brought into it his family and pairs of every living creature. Then the sky opened. Water poured down from above. Water burst up from below. The earth was covered, the valleys filled, The mountains disappeared beneath the flood, and every living thing that breathed upon the land was swept away, except for those in the vessel. When the waters finally receded, the vessel came to rest on a high mountain, and Noah stepped out onto a cleansed earth. From him came 3 white bulls, his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and from them the nations were born again. But the dream did not end there. Enoch saw the generations that followed. He saw the white bulls multiply and spread across the earth. Some remained white, faithful to the ways of God, but many changed color. Some became red, others black, still others spotted and mixed. They forgot the Lord. They built idols. They worshipped the sun, the moon, the stars. They turned to sorcery and divination, and once again the earth was filled with corruption. Then Enoch saw a single white bull standing alone among the colored herds. This was Abraham. God spoke to him, and Abraham obeyed. He left his homeland. He walked by faith. And from him came a line of white bulls, a people set apart. Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob, who became the 12 tribes of Israel. Enoch watched as they went down into Egypt, as they were enslaved, as they cried out for deliverance. And then he saw a white bull rise up among them, a leader, a deliverer. This was Moses. Moses stood before the rulers of Egypt, represented as wild dogs and wolves. He called down plagues upon them. And finally, he led the white cattle out of bondage, through a sea that parted before them and closed behind them, drowning their pursuers. Enoch saw them wander in the wilderness. He saw them receive the law from a mountain wrapped in fire and smoke. He saw them build a tabernacle, a dwelling place for the presence of God. But he also saw their rebellion, their grumbling, their turning back to idols. And he saw how God, though patient, did not leave them unpunished. The vision moved swiftly now, through the judges, through the kings, through the prophets. Enoch saw a white bull crowned and seated on a throne. This was David. He saw a magnificent house built for the Lord, a temple of stone and gold. This was Solomon's work. But then he saw the kingdom split in 2. The northern tribes, represented as cattle that wandered away, falling into idolatry and corruption. And he saw wolves and lions and birds of prey descend upon them. These were the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the enemies who came to devour the people of God. The northern kingdom fell. The people were scattered. And then the southern kingdom, Judah, also fell into sin. The temple was burned. The city was destroyed, and the white cattle were led away in chains. Enoch wept as he watched, for he knew these were his descendants, his people, and they had forgotten the God who had delivered them. But even in exile, a remnant remained. A small group of white bulls, faithful and true, who prayed and remembered the Lord, and in time they were allowed to return. They rebuilt the temple. They restored the walls, and they worshipped once more. But the vision did not stop. Enoch saw the nations rise and fall. Persia, Greece, Rome, each one represented by a different beast, powerful and cruel. And he saw the people of God suffering under their rule, oppressed and persecuted. But then, at the darkest moment, the vision changed. A light appeared, brighter than any Enoch had seen before, and from that light came a lamb, small, gentle, but radiant with the glory of heaven. This was the Messiah. The lamb walked among the white cattle. It healed them, it taught them, it gathered them close. But the wolves, the lions, the birds of prey turned on the lamb. They seized it. They killed it. And for a moment, the light went out. But then, the lamb rose, alive, victorious. and its light spread across the earth, brighter than before. And all the white cattle, all the faithful from every generation, rose with it. The vision reached its climax. Enoch saw a great throne descend from heaven, and upon it sat the Lord of the sheep, the King of all creation. The wolves, the lions, the beasts of prey were thrown into a pit of fire. The fallen stars, the watchers, were cast into the abyss. And the white cattle, now transformed into shining beings, stood before the throne in robes of light. A new heaven and a new earth appeared. A city of gold descended from above, and the presence of God filled everything. There was no more pain, no more tears, no more death, only peace, only light, only the eternal joy of dwelling with the Creator forever. Enoch woke from the dream, his face wet with tears. He sat up, trembling, and reached for his scroll, and he began to write. I saw the history of the world, from the beginning to the end, and I understood. God has never abandoned his people. Even when they fall, he raises them up. Even when they forget, he remembers. And in the end, the faithful will stand before him, clothed in glory, and dwell with him forever. This dream vision became one of the most powerful prophecies in the Book of Enoch, for it showed that history is not random. It is not chaos. It is a story, written by God, moving toward a conclusion already determined. And though darkness may rise, though evil may seem to triumph, the end is already known. The Lamb wins. The faithful are saved, and God makes all things new. Chapter 11. The Epistle of Enoch, 10 Weeks of History. When Enoch had finished recording his dream visions, when the last symbol had been explained and the last prophecy written down, he thought surely his work was complete. But God had one more message for him to deliver. Not a vision this time, not a journey through the heavens, but a letter, a final word to be passed down through the generations. An epistle. It came to him not in a dream, but in the stillness of prayer. A quiet, steady voice that spoke directly to his heart. Enoch, the voice said, you have seen the past and the future. You have witnessed the fall and the redemption. Now I will show you the shape of all history, not in symbols, but in truth, so that your children and their children after them may understand the plan I have laid from the beginning. And so Enoch listened, and he wrote. What he recorded became known as the Epistle of Enoch, a letter addressed not just to his own generation, but to every generation that would come after. And at the heart of it was a vision of time itself, divided into 10 great weeks, 10 epochs, 10 ages of the world. Each week represented a period of history, beginning with the creation and ending with the final judgment. And in each week, something pivotal would happen, something that moved the story forward, closer to the day when all things would be made new. Enoch's hand moved across the scroll as the vision unfolded. The first week. In the first week, I, Enoch, was born in the 7th generation from Adam, and in that week righteousness still endured. Men walked with God. The memory of Eden was fresh, and though sin had entered the world, faith remained strong. This was the age of the patriarchs: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, and Enoch himself. A time when the faithful still outnumbered the wicked. The second week. In the second week, great wickedness arose. Deceit multiplied, and the first end came. The great flood swept over the earth, and all flesh was destroyed, except for one man and his family, who were saved in a vessel of wood. This was the age of Noah, the cleansing, the reset, the moment when God looked upon the corruption of the earth and said, Enough. The third week. In the third week, a man was chosen from among the nations. His name was Abraham, and from him would come a people set apart, a nation called to remember the Lord when all others had forgotten. This was the age of the patriarchs renewed. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the covenant, the promise, the beginning of Israel, the fourth week. In the fourth week, a law was given. A deliverer rose up. The people were brought out of slavery and led to a mountain where the voice of God was heard and the commandments were written in stone. This was the age of Moses, the Exodus, the giving of the law, the building of the tabernacle, the shaping of a holy nation, the fifth week. In the fifth week, a house of glory was built, a temple of stone and gold where the presence of the Lord dwelt among his people. And for a time there was peace. This was the age of Solomon, the height of Israel's glory, the temple in Jerusalem, the kingdom united under one throne, the sixth week. But in the sixth week the people turned away. They forgot the Lord. They worshipped idols, and the house of glory was burned. The people were scattered, and darkness covered the land. This was the age of exile, the Babylonian captivity, the destruction of the temple, the scattering of the tribes, the long, bitter years of wandering in a foreign land. The seventh week. In the seventh week, a remnant returned. The house was rebuilt, but the hearts of the people remained divided. Some were faithful, many were corrupt, and even among the priests deceit was found. This was the age of the second temple, the return from exile. Ezra, Nehemiah, the rebuilding of Jerusalem. But also the rise of hypocrisy, the love of power, the slow drift away from true worship. And then Enoch's vision moved into the future, into the ages that had not yet come, into the time when the Messiah would appear. The eighth week. In the eighth week, the righteous will be given a sword of judgment. The wicked will be delivered into their hands, and the faithful will inherit houses of glory, for righteousness will be planted like a tree that never withers. This was the age of the Messiah's first coming, the establishment of the kingdom of God, not by force, but by faith, the gathering of the faithful from every nation. The ninth week. In the ninth week, righteous judgment will be revealed to the whole world. The works of the wicked will be destroyed. The earth will be written down for destruction, and all men will turn their eyes toward the path of righteousness. This was the age of preparation, the time when the gospel would spread to the ends of the earth, when every nation would hear, when the final harvest would begin, the 10th week. And in the 10th week, in the 7th part of it, the great eternal judgment will take place. The watchers will be judged. The first heaven will pass away. A new heaven will appear. And God himself will dwell among his people forever. There will be no more sin, no more death, only light, only peace, only the eternal presence of the Most High. This was the final age, the culmination, the end of all things and the beginning of eternity. Enoch set down his pen. His hand was trembling, for he had just written the entire story of the world, from beginning to end, and he knew that every word would come to pass exactly as it had been shown to him. But the epistle did not end there. Enoch continued writing, and now his tone changed. No longer was he simply recording visions. Now he was speaking directly, as a father, as a teacher, as one who had walked with God and wanted others to do the same. "My children," he wrote, "I have seen what is to come. I have seen the judgment of the wicked and the reward of the righteous. And I tell you this, do not follow the path of sin. Do not walk in the ways of the corrupt. For though they seem to prosper now, their end is destruction. He warned them about the love of money, the lust for power, the pride that leads to downfall. He urged them to live simply, to speak truth, to love mercy, to walk humbly with their God. "Do not oppress the poor," he wrote. "Do not turn away the stranger. Do not harden your hearts against the widow and the orphan, for the Lord sees all, and he will repay every man according to his deeds." And then, near the end, Enoch wrote words that have echoed through the centuries. "Woe to those who build their houses with sin. Woe to those who acquire gold and silver through injustice. Woe to those who trust in their riches and forget the God who gave them. For your wealth will not save you in the day of judgment. Your gold will become a testimony against you, and your silver will burn like fire. But blessed are the righteous. Blessed are those who walk in the way of truth. Blessed are those who trust in the Lord, even when the world turns against them. For their reward is great in heaven, and they will shine like the stars forever." Enoch finished writing. He rolled up the scroll, and he called his son Methuselah to come and sit beside him. "My son," Enoch said, "I will not be with you much longer. The Lord is about to take me. But these words, guard them, pass them down, teach them to your children and to your children's children. For the day will come when the world forgets, and these words will be the only light left." Methuselah wept. "Where will you go, father?" Enoch smiled gently. "I go to be with the one I have walked with all my life. Do not mourn for me. Rejoice, for I will see the face of God." And not long after, Enoch was taken. He did not die. He did not grow old and weak. He simply walked out one morning, as he always did, into the hills to pray. And he did not return. The family searched for him, but they found nothing, only the scrolls he had left behind. And those scrolls, the Epistle of Enoch, became a treasure, a guide, a light in the darkness. For they contain not just prophecy, but wisdom, not just visions, but instruction. They taught the faithful how to live, how to endure, how to hold fast to hope, even when the world seemed lost. And they reminded every generation that the story is not over yet, that we are still living in one of the 10 weeks, still walking toward the final day, still choosing, with every breath, which path we will follow, the path of righteousness, or the path of sin, the path of light, or the path of darkness. And in the end, every soul will stand before the throne, and the books will be opened, and we will see with perfect clarity that God was faithful all along. Chapter 12. The Final Judgment and New Heaven. There is a day coming that no one can escape, a day when every secret will be revealed, when every lie will be exposed, when every deed, good or evil, will be brought into the light. The day of judgment. Enoch had seen glimpses of it throughout his visions. He had watched the watchers bound in chains. He had witnessed the destruction of the Nephilim. He had seen the flood cleanse the earth. But all of those were only shadows, previews, warnings of what was still to come. Now, in his final vision, Enoch was shown the fullness of that day, the moment when time itself would come to an end and eternity would begin. It came to him on a quiet night, as he lay beneath the stars, praying as he always did. The sky above him began to change. Not slowly, but suddenly. The stars did not fade. They were torn away, like a curtain being ripped from its place. And behind them was light, pure, blinding, absolute light. Enoch covered his face, trembling. A voice spoke, deep, final, the voice of the Ancient of Days. "Enoch, behold the end of all things." The earth beneath him dissolved. He was lifted up, higher than he had ever been, until he stood in a place beyond space, beyond time. Before him stretched all of creation, every soul that had ever lived, standing in vast multitudes that stretched beyond sight, the living and the dead, the righteous and the wicked, kings and beggars, the powerful and the broken, all of them, standing before the throne. The throne itself was indescribable, not made of gold or stone, but of light so pure it seemed to have weight. And upon it sat the Ancient of Days, clothed in white, his hair like wool, his eyes like flames of fire. Around him stood the hosts of heaven, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, and countless angels, their faces radiant, their voices silent in reverence. And beside the throne stood the Son of Man, the one Enoch had seen before, the Lamb, the Messiah, the Judge of all the earth. Then the books were opened, not books of paper or parchment, but books of light, living records, written not with ink, but with truth itself. Every word ever spoken, every thought ever conceived, every action ever taken, all of it recorded, all of it remembered. Nothing was hidden, nothing was forgotten. The righteous stood with trembling hope. They knew they were not perfect. They had stumbled, they had fallen, but they had also repented. They had trusted, they had kept faith even when the world turned dark, and now they waited. The Son of Man spoke. His voice was like the sound of many waters, but it was not harsh. It was firm, clear, final. Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. The righteous looked at one another in wonder. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? When did we see you thirsty and give you drink? And the Son of Man replied, Truly, I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. And with those words, light poured over them. Their robes, once stained with the dust of the world, became white as snow. Their faces, once marked by sorrow and age, became radiant. They were transformed, glorified, made like the angels, yet still themselves. Still human, but now fully alive in a way they had never been before. And they were welcomed into the eternal kingdom. Enoch watched as they entered through gates of pearl into a city of gold, a city with no temple, for the Lord himself was its light, a city with no sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminated everything. There were trees there, trees like the ones in Eden, but greater. Their leaves were for the healing of the nations. Their fruit was ripe in every season, and there was a river, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God, bringing life wherever it touched. The righteous walked beside that river. They sang, they laughed, they embraced one another, reunited with loved ones lost long ago. There was no more pain, no more tears, no more death, only peace, only joy, only the presence of God filling everything forever. But then the vision shifted, and Enoch saw the other side. The wicked stood before the throne, and they were trembling, not with hope, but with terror. For they too saw the books, and they knew what was written there. Every lie, every betrayal, every act of cruelty, every moment they had turned away from the light. The Son of Man spoke again, and this time his voice was filled with sorrow. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. I was naked, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. They cried out, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you? And he answered, Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. And with those words, the light withdrew from them. The ground beneath them opened, and they were cast into the outer darkness. Enoch heard their cries, wailing, weeping, gnashing of teeth. But more than that, he heard their regret, the unbearable realization that they had been given every chance, that the door had been open, that mercy had been offered, and they had refused. The vision became darker still. Enoch saw the place of eternal punishment, not as a place of fire alone, though fire was there, but as a place of separation, of isolation, of the complete and total absence of God. It was not that God was tormenting them, it was that they had chosen, again and again, to turn away from him, and now he had honored their choice. They had wanted to live without God, and now they would, forever. And that, Enoch understood, was the true horror of hell. Not the flames, not the darkness, but the emptiness, the aching, endless void where the presence of God should have been. Then the vision shifted one final time. Enoch saw the old earth, scarred by sin, drenched in blood, groaning under the weight of corruption, and he saw it pass away, not destroyed, but transformed, melted down like gold in a furnace, purified, remade. The sky rolled up like a scroll, the mountains crumbled, the seas evaporated, and from the throne of God a voice spoke, Behold, I make all things new. And a new heaven and a new earth appeared. Enoch gasped, for it was not a different place. It was the same place, but cleansed, restored, made perfect. The Garden of Eden was there, but greater. The rivers were there, but clearer. The trees were there, but more beautiful. And in the center of it all, the throne of God. Not distant, not hidden, but right there, among his people. And the voice spoke again. Now the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the former things have passed away. Enoch wept, not from sorrow, but from overwhelming joy. For this was the end he had been shown. This was the promise that had sustained him through every trial, every doubt, every moment of darkness. God had not abandoned his creation. He had not given up on humanity. He was making all things new. And those who had trusted him, who had walked with him, who had held fast to faith even when the world seemed lost, would dwell with him forever. The vision faded. Enoch found himself once more beneath the stars, his face wet with tears. He sat up, his heart full, and whispered a prayer. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for showing me the end. Thank you for the hope. Thank you for the promise that you will make all things right. And as he prayed, he felt the presence of God settle over him like a warm embrace. For Enoch had seen the final judgment. He had witnessed the terror and the glory. And he knew, beyond any doubt, that God is faithful. That mercy triumphs over judgment. That love is stronger than death. And that in the end, light will always overcome the darkness. This is the hope we carry. This is the promise we hold. That one day, we too will stand before the throne. And if we have trusted in the Son of Man, if we have kept faith, if we have lived not for ourselves but for him, we will hear those words. Come, you who are blessed, inherit the kingdom prepared for you, and we will enter, and we will be home forever. Chapter 13. The Spirits of the Nephilim, Origin of Demons. After the great flood receded, after the waters returned to their places and the earth was cleansed, one question remained unanswered. What happened to the spirits of the Nephilim? The giants themselves were dead. Their bodies lay scattered across the earth, buried beneath mud and stone. But they had been more than mortal. They carried the blood of angels within them, and when they died, their spirits could not rest. Enoch had seen this. In his visions, he had been shown not just the judgment of the watchers, but the consequence of their sin, the lasting stain they had left upon the world. For the Nephilim, though destroyed in body, remained in spirit, and those spirits became the demons that would haunt humanity for generations to come. The Book of Enoch explains it clearly, in words both chilling and sad. The spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, and battle. They work destruction on the earth and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. These were not ordinary demons. They were the children of rebellion, half human, half divine, belonging fully to neither realm. When they lived in flesh, they had been powerful, violent, hungry, and when their bodies died, those same qualities remained in their spirits. But now, without form, without substance, they were even more dangerous, for they could not be seen, could not be touched, could not be stopped by sword or spear. They wandered the earth, restless and enraged, seeking to torment the descendants of those they had once terrorized. Enoch saw them in his vision, shadows moving across the land, invisible presences that brought fear, sickness, madness, and death. They whispered lies into the ears of men. They stirred up anger and hatred. They drove the proud to greater pride and the desperate to greater despair. They could not create, but they could corrupt. They could twist what was good and turn it into something dark. And because they had been born from the union of angels and humans, they understood both the spiritual and the physical world. They knew how to manipulate matter, how to move objects, how to possess the weak-willed and the broken-hearted. But most of all, they knew how to deceive. For they remembered what they had been. They remembered the glory of their fathers, the Watchers, and they hated humanity for it. They blamed mankind for their downfall. If the daughters of men had not been so beautiful, their fathers would never have fallen. If humanity had resisted, the rebellion would never have happened. And so they sought revenge. Not just against the living, but against the very image of God reflected in human beings. The Book of Enoch records a conversation between Enoch and the archangels about these spirits. Enoch asked, "Why do they remain? Why does God allow them to torment the earth?" And the angel replied, "Because the judgment is not yet complete. The spirits of the giants will remain until the day of the great consummation, the day when all things will be judged. Until then, they will continue to test humanity. They will reveal what is truly in the hearts of men. For those who turn to God will resist them, but those who turn away will fall under their influence." This was not cruelty, it was justice. For the spirits of the Nephilim were a consequence, a reminder, a living testimony to the cost of rebellion, and God, in his wisdom, allowed them to remain, not because he delighted in their torment of humanity, but because he knew that through them the faithful would be refined. Every temptation they brought was an opportunity to choose righteousness. Every lie they whispered was a chance to cling to truth, and those who resisted, who called upon the name of the Lord, would be strengthened. But those who gave in, who opened their hearts to pride, lust, greed, and hatred, would fall under their power. Over time, these spirits became known by many names. Some called them demons, others called them unclean spirits. Still others called them fallen ones, though they were not angels themselves, but the offspring of angels. In the New Testament, Jesus encounters them often. They recognize him immediately. They cry out, "What do you want with us, Son of the Most High? Have you come to torment us before the appointed time?" They knew who he was, and they knew their judgment was coming. But until that day, they remained, wandering, searching, seeking whom they might devour. The Apostle Peter would later write, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary the devil prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." But it was not just the devil, it was also these spirits, the restless souls of the Nephilim, still hungry, still violent, still filled with rage. Enoch saw their ultimate fate as well. In his vision of the final judgment, he watched as they were gathered. All of them. Every wandering spirit, every demon, every unclean presence. They were brought before the throne of God, and they were cast into the lake of fire along with the watchers who had fathered them. There they would remain, forever, in torment, in regret, in the full realization of what they had lost, for they had been born with a spark of the divine. They could have been something beautiful, something noble, but because of the sin of their fathers and the violence of their own hearts, they had become something else. And now there was no redemption for them, no second chance, no mercy, only judgment. Enoch wept when he saw this, not because he pitied them, but because he understood the tragedy of it all. The watchers had fallen because they desired what was not theirs. The Nephilim had been born from that desire. And now the spirits of the Nephilim wandered the earth, a living reminder of what happens when boundaries are crossed. When angels try to become men, when men try to become gods, when desire overrides obedience, the result is always the same: destruction, chaos, and a long, bitter road to judgment. But Enoch also saw the other side. He saw that the faithful were protected, that those who walked with God, as he had, were shielded from the worst of the Spirit's attacks. Not because they were perfect, not because they were strong, but because they were covered, guarded, kept by the hand of the Almighty, and he understood that this was the message he needed to leave behind. That the spirits are real, that the battle is real, but that God is greater than all of them, and those who trust in him need not fear. For the demons tremble at the name of the Lord, and on the final day they will be silenced forever. Enoch finished writing this section of his book with a solemn warning and a promise. Do not fear the spirits that roam the earth. Do not be deceived by their lies, for they have no power over those who belong to the Most High. Call upon his name, and they will flee. Trust in his protection, and you will be safe. For the day is coming when they will be judged, and the righteous will be vindicated. Hold fast, endure, and you will inherit eternal life. These words have echoed through the ages. They were read by the faithful in the days before Christ. They were remembered by the apostles, and they are still true today. For the spirits of the Nephilim still wander, still whisper, still seek to destroy, but they are not the end of the story. The end belongs to God, and his victory is certain. Chapter 14. Enoch's Ascension and Final Words. There comes a moment in every faithful life when the journey on earth draws to a close. For most, that moment is marked by death. The slow fading of breath, the final heartbeat, the return to dust. But for Enoch, it was different. He had walked with God for 365 years. Not in the way most men walk, stumbling through life with divided hearts, but with singular devotion, every step taken in faith, every word spoken in truth, every breath drawn in the presence of the Almighty. And God, who had shown him the mysteries of heaven and earth, who had revealed to him the fate of angels and men, now prepared to take him home, not through death, but through ascension. The day began like any other. Enoch rose before dawn, as was his custom. He prayed, he gave thanks, and then he walked out into the hills, where he often went to be alone with God. His son, Methuselah, watched him go. There was something different about his father that morning, a lightness in his step, a peace in his eyes that seemed deeper than usual. Methuselah called out, "Father, will you return for the evening meal?" Enoch turned and smiled. "If the Lord wills it, my son." And then he continued walking. But as Enoch climbed higher into the hills, the world around him began to change. The air grew warmer, the light grew brighter, and a presence, familiar and overwhelming, settled over him like a cloak. He stopped, and he waited. Then the voice spoke, the voice he had heard so many times before, the voice that had called him, taught him, and shown him wonders beyond description. Enoch. He fell to his knees, his face to the ground. "Here I am, Lord. Your work is finished," the voice said. "You have written what I commanded. You have faithfully recorded the visions. You have warned the generations to come. And now, it is time." Enoch's heart leapt. He knew what those words meant. He had known for days, perhaps even weeks, that this moment was approaching. "Time for what, Lord?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Time to come home." Tears filled Enoch's eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but of joy so deep it could not be contained. "But my family," he said, "my children, my people, what will become of them?" "They will remember you," the Lord said, "and through your words they will remember me. That is enough." Enoch nodded. He rose to his feet, wiping his tears. And as he stood, the light around him grew brighter still. Before he could take another step, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Methuselah running up the hill, breathless, his face filled with urgency. "Father," Methuselah cried. "Wait." Enoch smiled gently. "My son, you should not have followed me." Methuselah stopped a few paces away, breathing hard. "I had to. I felt it. I knew. You're leaving, aren't you?" Enoch said nothing, but his eyes spoke the truth. Methuselah's face crumpled. "Please, not yet. Stay a little longer. Teach us more. Guide us. We need you." Enoch stepped forward and placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "You do not need me, Methuselah. You have the scrolls. You have the words I have written. And more than that, you have the Lord. Walk with him, as I have walked with him, and you will never be alone." "But what do I tell the others?" Methuselah asked, his voice breaking. "What do I tell your grandchildren? They will ask where you have gone." Enoch smiled. "Tell them the truth. Tell them that I walked with God, and he took me." Methuselah wiped his eyes. "Will I see you again?" "Yes," Enoch said. "One day, when your own journey is finished, you will see me again, and we will stand together before the throne of the Most High, and there will be no more parting, no more tears, only joy." Methuselah embraced his father, and for a long moment they stood together in silence, the wind moving softly around them. Then Enoch stepped back. "Go now, my son. Return to your family. Teach them what I have taught you. And remember, always, that the Lord is faithful. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you." Methuselah nodded, though his heart was breaking. He turned and began to walk down the hill, glancing back every few steps. And when he looked back one final time, his father was no longer there. The hilltop was empty. Only the light remained, slowly fading into the morning sky. Methuselah stood frozen, staring at the place where his father had stood. And then, slowly, he fell to his knees and wept, not from grief, but from wonder, for he knew without a doubt that his father had been taken up, just as he had said, just as the Lord had promised. Enoch did not die. He was translated, lifted from the earth while still in the body, carried into the presence of God. The Book of Hebrews would later record it this way: "By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Now before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God." He pleased God. That was his legacy. Not power, not wealth, not fame, but faithfulness. He walked with God, and God walked with him. And when the time came, God did not let him taste death. He simply brought him home. In the days that followed, Methuselah gathered his family. He told them what had happened, and together they opened the scrolls their father had left behind. They read the visions, the warnings, the prophecies, the promises, and they understood. Enoch had not left them alone. He had left them something far greater than his presence. He had left them the word of God, the story of the watchers, the fall of the angels, the birth of the Nephilim, the judgment of the flood, the coming of the Messiah, the final day when all things would be made new. It was all there, written in his hand, preserved for the generations to come. And Methuselah made a vow. He would guard those scrolls. He would pass them down to his children, and they, in turn, would pass them down to theirs, so that no one would forget. So that even in the darkest times, when the world seemed lost, there would still be a light, a voice, a witness, the voice of Enoch, the man who walked with God. Methuselah lived for 969 years, longer than any other man in history. And all that time he kept the scrolls safe. He taught them to his son Lamech, and Lamech taught them to his son Noah. And when the flood came, Noah carried those scrolls into the ark, and they survived. Through the generations they were copied, translated, passed down, sometimes honored, sometimes hidden, sometimes banned, but they were never destroyed. For what God has spoken cannot be silenced, and what Enoch wrote, by the command of the Lord, endures to this day. Enoch's final words, written at the very end of his epistle, echo still. "I have seen the beginning and the end. I have witnessed the fall and the redemption. I have beheld the judgment and the glory. And I tell you this, the Lord is faithful. Trust in him, walk with him, and you will never walk alone. For he is the light of the world, and those who follow him will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Hold fast, my children, endure, and you will see the face of God." And with those words, the Book of Enoch comes to a close. Not with an ending, but with a beginning, for every soul who reads it is invited to do what Enoch did, to walk with God, to trust him, to obey him, to seek him with all their heart, and one day, when the journey is finished, to be taken home, just as Enoch was, into the eternal presence of the one who made us, the one who loves us, the one who will never let us go. You have heard the complete Book of Enoch. all 108 chapters, every vision, every warning, every promise. This is the book the Church buried for 1500 years, but it could not stay hidden, for truth, once spoken, can never truly be silenced. Enoch walked with God, and God took him, and his words remain, echoing through the ages, reminding us that we are not alone, that heaven is watching, that judgment is coming, and that mercy is still offered. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember this: you too are invited to walk with God. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but faithfully, one step at a time. And if you do, He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. And one day, when your journey is finished, He will take you home, just as He took Enoch, into the light, into the peace, into the eternal presence of the Most High. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you, and may you rest tonight in His perfect peace. This is Night Psalms, and we will walk with you again soon. Sleep well, and may the angels of heaven guard your rest. Amen.